now I think is over more than 300 maps and still growing. They're predominantly, but not exclusively, road maps from the 20th century, and it'll show the tremendous growth in San Diego's development over the past century. And along the way, I'll touch on some broader themes about mapping that apply to all cartography, and hopefully spur you to think about your own relationship to maps, not just paper, but those online, which may be the only maps that anyone under 30 is familiar with these days. Because maps not only represent a space, but their design and content can shape the understanding of that space. And we will start with if I remember how to use this. So this is a cartoon. It's a strip called Sally Forth. No, it's not called Sally Forth. I forget what it's called. But the family, they're lost. They're driving upstate New York. And his wife says, remember, car travel involved printed MapQuest. I mean, MapQuest is sort of an ancient thing that nobody knows about anymore. And if you missed a turn, your trip was ruined. And he says, I remember when it involved just a road map, and if I missed a turn, I lived wherever I ran out of gas. So that's sort of the historical aspect of it. So this first map is an 1851 map of San Diego Bay and adjoining coastline. And it's titled General Sketch of San Diego Bay and Los Coronados, San Diego Entrance and Approaches, and it's from a trigonometrical survey by the Survey of the Coast of the United States, published by the United States government. Now, there were a series of these surveys done along the California coast after the 1846-48 war with Mexico, where California and a big swath of the American Southwest today became part of the United States. And the whole coastline was surveyed. This is an example of the map that they did for San Diego. And it's a good example of a map commissioned to consolidate a military and political victory. In this case, the United States getting all of this territory. And the purpose was to familiarize captains of ships with accurate sailing directions for entering the bay and to follow depth charting on the map. Now, you can't read, whoops. The text is a little hard to read, but in essence, part of it that's interesting is it tells people, captains who are coming southbound, not to mistake the entrance to False Bay, which is the former name of what we know today as Mission Bay. Don't mistake that entrance for San Diego Bay, and follow the depth charting on the map, which you can see the various soundings that they did. Now, this map is and because it was for political purposes in a large sense, you notice there's no interest in anything that's on land, whether the tiny pueblo of Old Town, which was all that existed of San Diego at this point, or the Kumeyaay settlements that still were extensive in the area. It's the third oldest map in the library's collection, which the two older ones I did not donate. They were here before me. One is an 1825 map of the San Diego Pueblo and Old Town, and it's got the Spanish title, Plano de Pueblo de San Diego. And the second one is an 1849 plan of Old Town and La Playa. La Playa being the area of Point Loma where Rosecrans Street, Shelter Island is. So again, this is not a road map, but this is an example of, what would come early. The other example that goes back to 1803 was one of the major reasons Thomas Jefferson ordered Lewis and Clark to go out and survey the Louisiana Purchase, was in essence to put an American stamp on the land. You could draw a boundary, and once you had the boundaries delineated just by looking at that map, gave the United States more credibility, creed, if you will, that this land was part of the United States now and wouldn't go back to the British or some other country. Now, we'll move to...
Quick question.
Yeah.
How accurate is this compared to what we're able to measure today? Is this considered a very accurate?
Yeah. I mean, some of these trigonometrical, because it's where they use fixed surveying points. from 3, and they used soundings. And I haven't read about this specific one, but the one that they did for San Francisco Bay could actually still be used today. Part of the only difference that would make this a little less accurate is up here. This is where the San Diego River used to flow into San Diego Bay, right by where the Liberty Station is today. And it was channeled beginning in 1851. It was channeled into False Bay or Mission Bay. And part of the reason was they realized that there was so much silt that came from the river that if San Diego Bay was going to have a commercial potential, it needed to not have this silt. So beginning in 1851, over a series of decades, the river was channeled into what today is Mission Bay. And finally, the concrete revetments were done, I think, after World War I. But otherwise, it's pretty accurate. It's a little deeper today off of Point Loma because where they dredged for Shelter Island and Harbor Island, and that was to make the harbor deep enough so that the new class of aircraft carriers wouldn't get stuck in the mud when they, came to their berths on North Island. So by 1901, which is our next map, you can see this is generally recognized as a street map of American cities. Now, there were no regional road maps yet showing how to get from one place to another outside of your immediate vicinity because the automobile was in its infancy and travel by wagon or horse would be limited to your neighborhood. Trains were the overwhelming mode for city travel, and if you look at any state atlases of this era, they don't show roads between cities, they show railroad lines. But on the East Coast, these type of maps were beginning to be seen because in the late 1890s, bicycle clubs and bicycle touring became a trend on the East Coast. And what you would see as bicycle maps, say of New York, New England area, by 10 years later, they morphed into what we would recognize as road maps or street maps of cities. Now, so you keep in mind that, the 20th century road map is a distinct historical period, and they've now been, largely superseded by digital products, and we'll touch on that later. So this is a 1901 street map of downtown San Diego from the Standard Atlas of the United States by George Cram of Chicago. And Cram produced best-selling atlases for decades, from the late 1870s into the early 20th century. And it's one of the earliest known street maps of downtown San Diego, which is about all of San Diego that existed since Old Town had become sort of a backwater by then. This whole area, what we know as downtown today, was still known to a lot of people as Newtown. Because Alonzo Horton had essentially bought all this land and physically moved a lot of things from Old Town into Newtown. And of course, the bay was for commercial use. It was much closer to the bay. Matt?
What about, is part of this speculative? Like, in that time period, some of those streets in the north of City Park, those weren't actually there, were they?
I'll come to that on the next map. These streets were all laid out at this point. There might not have been much development on them, but the streets actually existed. Cram was pretty accurate with his maps. And as you see, they were used, a lot of these maps were used by real estate promoters, to show people. And as an example of that, we have from the Evening Tribune of November 16th, 1964, we have the Cram map being used in a real estate ad for promoters of Middletown. And the copy says that Middletown has the finest views of the bay, along with convenient access to all parts of the developed town. Well, it's still true for Middletown today, if you live up on the cliffs. But beginning with the airport development in the late 1920s, when they filled in the land here, and then they built the aircraft manufacturing plants, and then Interstate 5 came through in the late 50s and early 60s and obliterated part of of Middletown on the flat area. And now, some of you may know, the mayor has plans to take an abandoned warehouse and make it into a mega homeless shelter. Middletown, at least the flatter parts, don't have quite the cachet that they might have had 120 years ago. But yeah, Middletown was being promoted very prominently. Now, this is a 1909. This is the first tour book by the Automobile Club of Southern California. Ironically, 2 years ago, the last print edition of their tour books, they now don't do anything in paper, it's all online for the Auto Club of Southern California. Well, the Auto Club was established in 1900 with a handful of members, but by 1909, it boasted of more than 600 dues-paying associates, and this tour book was put out because auto travel out of town had become a realistic, if still arduous, form of leisure. And this guide featured nearly 100 point-to-point maps with route descriptions, city and vehicle laws, advertisements, hotels, restaurants, scenic and cultural sites, automobiles, and motor oils. Interestingly, there were no ads in the guide for gasoline, and neither were there ads for gasoline in similar guides at the time that were put out by Goodrich Tire, Fireman's Fund of San Francisco, and Monarch Oil Refinery. Even Monarch Oil's own guide featured its oils, not its gasoline, because hard as it is to believe today, it was not yet clear whether electric or gasoline cars would predominate in the 20th century. This tour book's introduction promised that nowhere were there greater attractions than in Southern California, quote, and with this book in hand, you may safely give yourself up to the motorist's greatest pleasure, that of touring. So automobiles were still largely a group leisure activity for the adventurous and the very well-to-do. 2-hour commutes, weren't on anybody's radar yet. And neither was radar, for that matter. So let's look at an example of what they called the world's drive. This was San Diego. You start out in downtown. You go out east to La Mesa, a little fork in the road called Alta, then cut up north into what is today the eastern part of Miramar Marine Corps Air Station, cut through Miramar, cut through what today I guess is Mira Mesa Boulevard, down the 16, what today is the 15, Miramar, Linda Vista. And Linda Vista back then was not where Linda Vista is today. Linda Vista back then is where, anybody know the Pyramid, the furniture store on Mira Mesa Boulevard, the Black Pyramid? That's where Linda Vista was back then. It was a railroad stop for the Santa Fe. And in World War II, it was a big railroad stop because it was all military around there. And then you came back down through Torrey Pines, through La Jolla, Pacific Beach, and to San Diego. It was 54.7 miles. And I'll read you the first couple of graphs. So to do it, you had to follow somebody, you had to have a passenger in the car who would be reading this out because, well, I'll read the first thing to you if you can't see it. It says, go north on 5th Street from 5th and D Streets to end of paved street, 2.2 miles. Turn right, go east under bridge following the car line, streetcar, 3.5 miles to Fairmont Station. Turn left, 0.4 mile to El Cajon Avenue. Turn right following main traveled road, 4.9 miles to railroad crossing La Mesa. Continue on main traveled road in easterly direction, 2.3 miles to crossing Flume Line. That was the water coming down from Cuyamaca, which is the only water supply to San Diego at the time. It was a gravity flume all the way from near Julian down to La Mesa. Turn left over Concrete Bridge along Alta Drive, 5.6 miles to end of Boulevard. Alta Drive is one of San Diego's most scenic attractions overlooking El Cajon Valley, one of the most beautiful in Southern California. Thence left in westerly direction, 1 mile to Fanita Road, gate on right-hand side of road, pass through gate to right, continue north 0.4 mile until San Diego River is reached. This is passable except during winter and high water. And that doesn't even, that only gets to here. So it's a whole nother thing, and then goes on to the next page. So, it was, as I say, it was for touring, for the adventurous, and for people who had money. And you notice the mileage was very important for somebody to keep track of the odometer, because you had the 2.2 turn here, 3.2. And odometers had just been added to automobiles a year or two previous with Henry Ford's introduction of the Model T, which was considered a fairly economical car at the time. The Alta Drive that's referenced is today's Murray Drive and Travelodge Drive, if any of you are familiar with the area around Grossmont High School and the back way down into El Cajon Valley. And it parallels the railroad tracks. The train they're talking here was originally called the San Diego and Southeastern Railroad, later became the San Diego and Arizona Railroad, then the San Diego, Arizona Eastern, and today it's part of the San Diego Trolley's Green Line to El Cajon. And indeed, there is a fine view of the valley from Travelodge Drive. And there still exists, believe it or not, a half a block sliver of Alta Drive. It's a dead-end street adjacent, backs up to some of the athletic fields of Grossmont High School. So that would be your drive. Now, this is a map, one of 4 maps that came in a brochure. You can see the cover at the top left, the map's folded up. This was a 1911 map brochure folder by Rodney Stokes and Company. Rodney Stokes was a longtime San Diego local map maker, cartography firm, and they were headquartered at 3rd and E, which is where the post office in Horton Plaza, or the former Horton Plaza, is today. So Stokes made a lot of early San Diego maps. This is there's a 1911 map brochure of downtown San Diego. There's a map of, next slide, you see a map of the county, a map of the La Jolla Strand, and a map of Lemon Grove. Again, they're used a lot by real estate because there's real estate promotions for the La Jolla Strand, which is the area around downtown La Jolla that was developed early, and for owners of the land around Lemon Grove, who touted it in this brochure as the county's finest subdivision. Now, this is an earlier question of mats. This area here, Old Town, these developers had dreams of what they would ideally like to do. So they would submit their plans to the planning department would approve it. And then map makers would go to the planning department and say, do you have maps we can use in putting together our map? So the map for Old Town shows all these streets going right through Presidio Park, where the Serra Museum is, right down to the river, as if there were no cliffs there, and the only roads, as you know, wind down, like a hind leg of a dog, down to the bottom of Presidio Hills. And you'll see on a lot of oil company maps, when they started making maps of San Diego in the 30s, they continued showing this. The only map maker from my research that that did their own homework, if you will, and never fell for these ghost subdivisions was the Auto Club. So it's, where the I-5, I-8 interchange is, and there's that huge hill there. Well, these maps pretend that, it was all flat land. It must have been funny to people who, who knew about it, I suppose. So we'll go, okay, these are the first example of strip maps, which were the first standalone road maps issued by the Automobile Club of Southern California. We have 5 examples here. This is a 1914 map from San Diego. The second part of San Diego to Imperial Valley is from Campo to El Centro. And you can see how crooked the road is. And what the Auto Club, unlike a lot of road map makers for some reason, was very late to labeling whether the roads were paved or not.
So you look at this, you think, okay, that's the road. Well, we'll come back to, here's the first part of it, San Diego to Imperial Valley, San Diego to Campo. And if you'll notice, the main road to Imperial Valley was along today's 94, not along Interstate 8. There essentially was not even a wagon road that was passable, which is Interstate 8. The funny thing is, today's 94 is about as crooked as this road, but it's paved. Let me go, okay, so the roads, it shows a road. This is the road, this is a 1914 postcard. This is the road in the Incapod Gorge when you start to go down into Imperial Valley from Jacamba in East San Diego. And you see it's all dirt, would wash out frequently. The original road to the Imperial Valley, because it was so sandy, is on the right here, and this postcard is from the 1930s. You can see the old road, it was a planked road. They put down 30 miles of wooden planks, and you drove on the planks to get between El Centro and Yuma in particular. There's still a section you can see today if you know where the off-roading area is, just before you get to the California-Arizona line. If you drive to the right instead of the left to where the dune buggies gather, they've preserved about a half mile of this plank road, and you can see it, and it's amazing that you could drive anything on it. And that's the new road to the left, which is the ultra-modern, which to our mind is, a horrible road, right? It's a two-lane road that, you get off on the shoulder, you're stuck in the sand. This is the original Torrey Pines grade. Now, if you go on the Torrey Pines State Park, this is the road you climb up past the fee station in the state park. It's paved, obviously, today, but this was the main road to LA into the 20s. There's another shot of it going down the grade. That's Bataquitos. No, that's not Bataquitos Lagoon. That's Sorrento Lagoon. And that's Del Mar, obviously undeveloped to the north. This is another shot of what is today Interstate 8 down the into Imperial Valley. Notice they actually have a telegraph poles up. Interesting. And this is essentially the early Pomerado Road today. From you get off Pomerado and go to Scripps Ranch. But that was the main route to inland. It didn't cut at Miramar. It curved. The main road went on Pomerado, and this was the grade up and down Pomerado. I mean, there's still a little part of this left, if you know where to find it. Now, this is the first paper maps that the Auto Club issued. This is in 1915 of the county. And if you notice, it doesn't even include the entire county. It cuts off the county east of Campo, east of Julian, to Zoborrego, that area, S2, where Agua Caliente is. That didn't exist. Probably they did that because the first map that they did for San Diego County was 1915. That was the same year as the 1915 Panama, California Exposition in Balboa Park. So Auto Club probably figured there was enough demand on the part of motors from LA coming down that they could issue this map. Similarly, they issued this in 1915. This is called Principal Automobile Routes in and out of San Diego, California. And as you see, it just shows the main routes north. So as you see, what you know today is 101 Interstate 5 went through O-Town. There was nothing through Rose Canyon, so you turned left down Grand at Pacific Beach. Then you went up through La Jolla around Torrey Pines, and that was on your way to LA. And you see very prominently the exposition grounds in the center, San Diego. Again, this map was this map was very popular in LA, in and out of LA, because there was a lot of growth at that point. But for San Diego, the only reason why they did this again was to help people coming down from LA to get in and out of San Diego. Two versions. This is, there was a map maker called Thurston of Pasadena This is his 1916 map of San Diego County. And as you see, he included the entire county, at least. And what's interesting is the roads, well, again, very few were paved, but Interstate 8, or before that US 80, and before that just the road through Descanso, that was one of the first roads that got state highway money. So part of this was actually paved. And one of the first parts they did is they made a bypass so you didn't have to go through Campo. So you could go straight and then into the Imperial Valley. And again, by this time, this route is becoming a viable alternative to the southern route, which had been a wagon road back from about the 1850s. But you can see, basically, the road network is not that different from today. This is 100 years later, but essentially the road to Julian, goes up this way. The road to Ramona goes this way. The road north Escondido has been straightened out. At this point, the road ran from Escondido, San Marcos, Vista, Fallbrook, and then back to Temecula around instead of going straight through. This was barely a road, even though it shows it as a road. This was the only route you could really do with an auto. So, and here's the route, Otay Valley Road today. So in some ways, the transportation patterns haven't really changed outside of the city. I mean, within the city, they've changed a lot with freeways, but yeah.
What's the border line for San Diego County in the north?
For the north, it's the same as today. Here, and then runs up to here, Orange. So it's straight to Riverside County, and then Marietta, and right past San Clemente. There was no San Clemente, though, until 1929. The town didn't exist. San Juan Capistrano did because there was a mission, but San Clemente was a real estate development that started right when the Depression happened, so it didn't grow very quickly. Now, let me go back a couple of signage. There was no uniform signage, so the Auto Club actually made signs and put them on roads, and they were very proud of this in their annual update of their map for California. They would tell how many number of roadside guideposts that they had put up. So in 1916 map, they had put up 8,000. In 1917, it had grown to 40,000. In 1919, they said they had put up 50,000. In 1921, they had put up 79,994. I guess the bean counters in their accounting department wanted an exact number. And in 1923, they had put up 84,233 maps. But some of these signs, I remember into the 70s, you could still see some of these signs still existed, particularly if you took not Interstate 5, but you took the old 101 Coast Highway to Encinitas, Cardiff, Leucadia. You'd still see these signs. I think at some point they all disappeared because antique collectors realized they could be worth a lot of money taken off. Just like there used to be, for people who are my age, the old 101 was delineated all through California by a mission bell that would be put periodically along the side of the road. And it was this beautiful bell, and it signified it was the Royal Road, the road. And all of those disappeared by the 60s because people realized that they were worth a lot of money.
They're actually back. You still see them on the 101.
Yeah, but they're not. But they're like plastic. They're like laminated plastic or something. So if somebody steals it, they can, press out another one within 24 hours. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I recognize most of them. I'm not familiar with Consiglio. The second name on the...
This is a map. It was from L.A., the L.A. area, Topanga Canyon in L.A. Oh, Innsville. Well, there were several of these places that no longer exist. I mean, there was in San Diego, north of Lakeside, the railroad ended at a place called Foster. Foster no longer exists. It's where El Capitan High School is, and a couple of miles from where Barona Casino. But the name Foster has just disappeared. Just like Alta. Alta was the name of a railroad station past La Mesa on the railroad line. But, you know, the railroad ended passenger service. Alta station was torn down and the name Alta disappeared. There's a great book you can find in the library, San Diego Place Names. The author is Lou Stein, S-T-E-I-N. And it tells you the history of all these names that are still exist and some that have disappeared. I recommend it because he was a teacher at my junior high school. And believe it or not, he taught Esperanto.
You have a copy of it on the special collection.
Oh, you do? Yeah, it's a good book. But, I mean, Esperanto never quite caught on as an international language. So we will come to, oil company maps had existed since the early teens. There's a big argument among map collectors over what is the first real oil company map. Some say this Gulf oil map of 1914. Some people say, no, it was a map by Rand McNally for Standard Oil. I actually have in the collection a 1912 Monarch Oil of San Francisco, but it doesn't qualify as a paper map because it's a guide with strip maps. But the arguments are all over the place, and the bottom line is, who cares? But the first, San Diego didn't get anything on a oil company map until 1932, when Shell Oil, as part of its Los Angeles and vicinity map, included on the Verso a San Diego and vicinity map. So this is the first actual map of San Diego, not a street map, but again, a vicinity map, sort of like the Auto Club in and out maps in 1932. And it's full color. I mean, it's a nice map. And you see how the military had already gotten a huge presence. Fort Rosecrans, the whole point, the Marine base, the naval base, the destroyer base. North Island was actually divided between an Army aviation field on the south end and the Navy's aviation field at north end. And the division continued until 1939 when we started to rearm, thinking about, at some point there's going to be another war. President Roosevelt signed an executive order giving the entire North Island to the Navy. The Army wasn't really that interested in, but the derivation of here goes back to 1911, when it was sort of a civilian takeoff field. And then during World War I, the Navy, because there's already the ships, the Navy got interested as a naval field, and the Army got equally interested. So they split it for 20 years. So this is 1932. Remember, this is the depths of the Depression. Who could afford an automobile unless you were super rich? But the oil companies still publish these beautiful color maps, being positive, and there's no better example of that is the cover for their 1933 map they used on every Shell map. There wasn't a San Diego one, so this is an example from Boston, but it shows this beautiful woman with her Scottish Terrier in a convertible, having not a care in the world, right? This is 1933. I mean, the unemployment rate is 30%. The stock market has collapsed. We've gone off the gold standard. It's a bank holiday. But these is the famous, it remains famous today as some of the best art that went with oil company maps ever. It's called the Shell license plate. So you see all these different license plates from. And if you go to the Smithsonian in Washington, they actually have a huge poster that you can buy in the gift shop at the Smithsonian Art Museum of this cover. But I just think it's ironic, 1933. But by 1939, we get our own street map from an oil company. Both Shell and Chevron, Standard Oil / Chevron, issued them for 39. They were both made by the same cartographer, H.M. Goucher of Chicago. There basically were three major map makers for oil company maps. H.M. Goucher of Chicago, Rand McNally of Chicago, and General Drafting of New York. Goucher made both the shell and stand. But you can see this is the San Diego map. They actually have a nice drawing of Broadway looking, I guess, looking west. Here's the La Jolla, they call the La Jolla Pacific Beach area. So you see nothing in the Soledad area, nothing there. All of it is bird rock and what was known as La Jolla Strand, and then around to Scripps Institute of Oceanography, which had been there since 1901. And then, but you can see at this point, Torrey Pines Road had been built, so you didn't have to go to LA up the old road that hugged the cliffs going by Scripps Institute. And one other thing about this map, oh, it's on the next slide, I think. Nope. Yeah. Now you can see North Island has become completely Navy. Fort Rosecrans has expanded. The Marine base has expanded. You see Lindbergh Field is this tiny little spit of land here because the planes didn't require much of a runway to land or take off. So where the present terminal is today was still all underwater. And remember, this whole area here, again, the river didn't go into Mission Bay. The river traditionally had come through, where the Marine base is, and had come into to the bay right here. So all of this land, where the Navy station is, the Marine Corps base, the airport, that's all filled land. I mean, it wasn't ocean. I mean, it wasn't deep bay, but it was, it was tidal land that you couldn't build anything on. So that's 1939. Now I'm going to show you a few maps that aren't strictly road maps. This is in a way, but I use this because this is another example of a beautiful artwork. It's a Texaco map of 1929. It showed from Canada to Mexico, sort of tour routes. And it's just considered one of the, along with the shell map, very artistic. And it pointed out all the national parks and monuments. It was a true touring map. It wasn't really to get you from point A to point B. Now, this Banks issued a lot of maps and gave them free. Rodney Stokes made San Diego, this is from San Diego Trust and Savings Bank. First National Bank, Bank of America, they all issued maps and gave them free to customers. I show you this cover only because San Diego Trust and Savings Bank, which is downtown at 6th, the building's still there at 6th and Broadway on the northwest corner. It's the Courtyard by Marriott today. It had the first air beacon, air light for the airport was on top of the building, and they feature it on this. You'll see it better in the next. But it's ironic because people today, I worked for a while when I was with the LA Times, we were in the 701B building across the street from Symphony Hall, and some of the new reporters who had never been in San Diego before said, geez, the airplanes landing in Lindbergh Field seem to come pretty close to like the El Cortez and all that. Well, think of how close they were coming when the beacon was over, the building at 6th and Broadway, and the landing configuration for the airport was a little different. Now, they weren't jets, they were, single-engine planes, but still, I don't know. And they were so proud of it, they issued a postcard, San Diego Trust and Savings Bank, and they gave this postcard out free. Flashing from dusk to dawn, San Diego's first aviation beacon in the tower of San Diego Trust and Savings Bank. The other interesting thing about this building has nothing to do with maps. The man who owned San Diego Trust and Savings Bank for years and years was a man named Tom Sefton. And he's also known to have the world's largest model railroad set up. And it was for a long time in the basement of this building. It's now, he moved it to his house, his home in La Jolla, and when he died, I think it's now at the Del Mar Fairgrounds. I know it's been preserved. I think it's Del Mar Fairgrounds. But it was the largest model railroad collection in the country. And they would open it up, like twice a year. You could go in and see it. It was quite interesting. This is one of the greatest maps, and I'll read this one to give it due justice. I won't talk from memory because I'll leave out a few of the funny details. It's from 1928. It's a pictorial map of San Diego. It was only 2,000 were printed, and it was issued by the Marston department store to mark its 50th anniversary in San Diego. And Marston was the city's premier department store into the late 1960s. Founded by George Marston, who became an early civic leader and philanthropist and earned the unofficial moniker of San Diego's first citizen. And his house today is at the north end of Balboa Park off of 6th and Upas, and it's a historical museum that Soho, Save Our Heritage organization, does tours through, I think only on weekends, or they may do them during the week as well. It's a beautiful house. So Marston commissioned Joe Mora, who was a brilliant California cartographer who specialized in these whimsical maps for numerous California locales, and incidentally was a former cowboy before he became a map maker. So he created one of his signature carts, C-A-R-T-E-S, as his maps were known. And San Diego is the subject matter. So the map, as you can see, is a centerpiece bird's eye view of San Diego Bay and the Pacific coastline, surrounded by this decorative border made of dozens of inset illustrations depicting historical figures, events, and landmarks. Now, if I remember how to do this properly, I can click, and then I can drag and highlight. So maybe you can see he has here birthday of San Diego, July 16, 1769. Father Junipero Serra Portola, first attack on the mission, August 15, 1769, when the Kumeyaay burned the mission down. He has here the Mission Bay roller coaster, the plunge, dancing. You can see the U.S. Army is the blimp, the Naval Air Station is this tiny little biplane. Coronado is represented by polo, so I guess it was a rich little town even back then. Hotel Bell, and then you have Cabrillo here looking through a telescope or a periscope, saying, "Caramba, you'd never know the old place now." So truly a whimsical map. Now let's see. Okay. So the full text. Marston presented these to friends and customers, of his department store, and the full title was a cart portraying with most exacting fidelity the history, romance, and humor of the glorious city of San Diego by the Pacific, likewise showing the noble harbor and its surrounding terrain, presented to you herewith by the Marston Company in souvenir of its golden anniversary, and dedicated to the memory of that bold navigator and discoverer of the port, Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo. And another irony is, there's still a dispute that goes on whether Cabrillo was Portuguese or Spanish. It's heated up recently because a historian at University of San Diego supposedly discovered evidence that Cabrillo had citizenship, Spanish citizenship, but a professor at American River College near Sacramento has looked at this and said, but you completely misinterpreted the meaning of citizenship in Spain in the 15th century. In essence, we know he was born in Portugal. Spain had, and many Portuguese explorers, into the hundreds, sailed under the flag of Spain. So it's not unusual that, he sailed under the flag of Spain, but he shows that this, quote, honorary citizenship, first of all, has this completely different meaning in the 15th century than it has in the 20th century. and that you can trace his actual birthplace back to Portugal. So this debate goes on. The Spanish side is pushed by the director of the House of Spain, in the cottages in Balboa Park. But it makes for truly interesting academic infighting if you're, interested in how many angels are on the head of a pin. So we'll move from whimsical maps into a more, we'll do one more. This is a whimsical map of the 1935 California Exposition in Balboa Park. And you see the Palace of Photography, which is where the addition to the art museum is today. This is the original art museum. You can still see the Oregon Pavilion. Below the Oregon Pavilion was what was called Cowboy Gulch, where the Japanese garden is today. You can see where they park the cars over where the parking lot for the zoo is today. Interesting is this was at the end of Laurel Street. There was a trolley station, and the trolley line to North Park ran behind what is on today's Park Boulevard, because today's Park Boulevard was a trolley line. Park Boulevard, and this didn't change until the mid-1970s. Park Boulevard today is the dead-end road that goes between the zoo and the Spanish Village. And the interesting thing is, if you've ever gone to Morley Field where the tennis courts are, you turn by Roosevelt Junior High, go down the road, there was this huge bridge that went over the road, which was the trolley line to North Park. And when the trolley line was taken up in 1950, they tore down that bridge. And if any of you have ever wondered why one block south of University and Park, there's this weird intersection where University goes to the right and Georgia Street goes straight. Well, the trolley line went down Georgia Street and then went over this bridge behind the zoo and behind Balboa Park, behind where the hospital is today in downtown. So and today, of course, the MTS is spending tens of millions of dollars to build an express route along the same path. Somebody had enough, common sense to keep the rail line there. It would probably be used today. But this whimsical map, on the back of it is a whimsical map of sort of the region. And you notice a lot of people called it the Bay of San Diego. Didn't become officially San Diego Bay in all the official documents until the late 1930s. So a lot of early maps, you'll see Bay of San Diego. Now this map was obviously after Joe Mora, but it was done, I don't know who the artist was because it was done for Shell Oil Company, but there was an artist in Phoenix named Reg Manning who did these type of whimsical maps of Southwest locations and tourist spots into the 1980s. And it might have been an early map of him, but I don't know, is the simple answer. Now, the next several maps are from World War II, and they involve map censorship, also known as map masking, which is a particular interest of mine because this map, which is a Shell Oil map, 1942 of San Diego, I found going through just papers and papers of my parents after they died, and tucked away was this map. And it says map San Diego vicinity, but in small letters down here it says all points of military interest have been removed voluntarily from this map and index. And if you'll, I guess it's the next slide. Next slide will show. Yeah, so you'll notice here where the Marine base and the airport is just blank. Where the Navy base is just blank. Where Fort Rosecrans is just blank. Where the airfield North Island, they left in North Island, but it's blank. Where the destroyer base and then shipyards is all blank. This was map masking in World War II. Right after Pearl Harbor, within 3 weeks, President Roosevelt established by executive order the Office of Censorship, and it was essentially to censor post mail, radio communication, and maps. And it was, quote, voluntary, but there was strong pressure from military authorities who did a lot of the map reviews for the Office of Censorship. And companies were expected to ask themselves, is this information that I would like to have if I were the enemy, and act accordingly. And the great book is called Secrets of Victory by a professor at Ohio State, Michael Swanson, if anyone of you are really interested to get into the weeds on this. But Army camps, naval stations, military civilian airports, refineries, shipyards, anything that would have been considered wartime targets. But there were inconsistencies because A, it was voluntary, and map makers, the big three, Rand McNally, Goucher, and H.M. Drafting, wanted to get their oil company maps that they'd already contracted for 42. Right, Pearl Harbor happened at the end of 41, so you were in the process of doing all these maps. Get them done because the military wanted them to work exclusively on making maps for the military, because the Army and Navy needed tons and tons of maps suddenly. So there were inconsistencies, depend on who would review it and how early in 42 a particular map was reviewed. So here's the same map by Goucher, 1942, for Standard Oil. Again, there's a statement on here, special notice, their own, in cooperation with the United States military authorities, we have eliminated from this map all airports and military establishments which they have suggested. But, and you'll see this map included San Diego traffic laws that the Western Defense Command required, lights out, how you had to dim. The authorities went out into offshore, and they looked at high points, like if you're driving on Soledad, if you were driving on Point Loma, and where you could see lights from out in the Pacific. So those areas where you had to have your lights dimmed so they couldn't be seen offshore, because submarines, Japanese submarines into mid-1942 patrolled along the coast from Washington down past San Diego and actually sunk a half a dozen merchant marine ships. And in February 42, they actually lobbed shells at an oil field near Santa Barbara, the Elwood oil fields. Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, I thought you.
No, I was going to. No, I was just going to mention that. For some reason, I thought that was up by Richmond, north of the Bay Area. They logged.
No, it was Elwood oil fields at Santa Barbara. They're just northwest of Santa Barbara. And 3 days later, somebody in LA, some anti-aircraft gunner at night mistook a balloon for an air attack, and there was just tons of anti-aircraft fire that went up in the LA area, and the only people wounded were those who were hit by shrapnel coming down, because there was obviously no air attack. But it tells you how jittery they were on the Pacific coast at this time. But the inconsistencies are on the, no, not this one yet. On this, anyways, on the Standard Oil map, which I didn't put the slide in, they labeled Fort Rosecrans and they labeled North Island. Same map by Goucher, but a different censor looked at the same map, and Goucher was in a hurry to get these maps out and transition to military work that nobody noticed these inconsistencies. And it's not just on this, it's on these World War II maps for 42 all over the nation. You see these inconsistencies. Goucher never made another oil map until 1945, when they reprinted some of their 1941 maps. Rand McNally continued to make maps for Union Oil, Gulf, and Texaco, but they were truncated and they were multi-state maps, so they would combine 3 or 4 states into one. They also still made maps for railroad companies. But Rand McNally, by 43, took the censorship to the nth degree. So you see this 1943 map for Union Oil by Rand McNally. There was no cover label, but not only did they blank out every military, on the downtown map, they even took out the Santa Fe Railroad Depot. So, I mean, even even the Auto Club didn't take out the Railroad Depot, but for some reason, you know. And the other funny thing about this 43 Union Oil map is the cover you see is a Navy guy, an Army guy, and a war plant worker looking at a city map. Well, the irony, whether it was intended or not, is none of them would be able to find their place of work because the map would be masked. So I have a feeling the humor was meant. You know, it was some little gremlin in the art department says we'll have fun with this. Now the Army's censorship, though, and military orders were taken seriously in California up to at least 1944, because the Army's Western Defense Command, which was out of San Francisco, they wielded quasi-martial control in the region. I mean, they reviewed all the maps specifically, which is why there was generally more consistency in the California maps. They ordered blackouts. Their permission was required for large outdoor gatherings. And their fear of attack led to the only known map seizure in World War II. They corralled 5,000 copies of the January 2nd, 1942 Los Angeles Times. There were 5,000 copies that the Los Angeles Times would mail overseas to subscribers. The Defense Command took all 5,000 and they cut from each a map that showed the California locations of military airfields, naval bases, and Army camps. The irony here is that information had been provided to the LA Times by the military in early November, because the LA Times every year on January 2nd prepared this huge, what was called the Jubilee edition, that touted everything about Southern California, because it was time for the Rose Bowl football game when all these tourists from out of state came in. So the irony is the military had given them all the information, and then they made them take them out of the map. Such is war. Now, this is 1944 Auto Club map of California. The Auto Club did a lot of dual-use maps for the military and maps for civilians. This is a mass map of San Diego they did. Everything is blacked out. The next map, same cover, so you wouldn't know just from the cover. Lists all the military bases, even Camp Pendleton, which had been established during the war. Now, if you were a resident of San Diego and you picked up this map, you knew something was amiss. But if you had just come to California, to work in the war plants, or you were your family was in the military, whatever, and we were living here, you wouldn't know. You just pick up this map and think, oh, there's no airport, or unless you drove by it, and then you could figure out, okay, for whatever reason they're doing this. The only known map of the Auto Club that I've been able to find that actually said military on it. It did have a street map of San Diego, 1944, and they did have military issue on the cover, and inside they had a statement that said, this document contains information affecting the national defense of the United States within the meaning of the Espionage Act, its transmission or the revelation of its contents in any manner to an authorized person is prohibited by law. So that was the underlying legal justification for all of this. And that's this is the military one, where they have the Marine base, an Army base, they have Camp Elliott, everything on Fort Rosecrans. So the Auto Club had tons of maps. And this is just to throw in where the sports arena is today. and now that's going to be torn down, I guess, and redeveloped, was housing for the military dependents and war workers during World War II. It's called frontier housing. Here's Pacific Highway, an old interchange with Rosecrans Street, and all this area was housing. And it existed until the sports arena was built in the mid-'60s. There was also housing in Linda Vista, some of which has been kept. Some of the housing near Midway and Rosecrans on the other side of Frontier Housing, which today is pretty nice Navy housing if you drive by it. That was housing. There was housing in Azure Vista. Any of you know where Garbage, the surfing area Garbage is at the end of Point Loma, just below Point Loma Nazarene College? All that land there called Azure Vista, it's these $1 million homes today below Sunset View Elementary. That was military housing, some of the most beautiful land in San Diego. In fact, that's where my mom and my aunt and my older siblings lived while my dad was in the Pacific in World War II, Azure Vista. They lived there till 1950, and then they found a house and it was all torn down and redeveloped, for private sector housing. There's another shot of frontier housing. This is a 1957 shell map, and I show it to you because it's essentially the last map of San Diego before freeways started to obliterate neighborhoods in the center of the city. You can see, well, you can't see, but see these dotted lines here is what's going to be the 94 from downtown to Wabash Boulevard, which is today the Interstate 15, because the 94 was the first freeway in the mid-50s through here, but it was all open canyon land. But from west into downtown, they essentially obliterated the community of Southcrest and part of Barrio Logan. Interstate 5, you can see the dotted lines. It's going to come through Middletown, slice through the heart of Little Italy, slice through the Barrio, and then come back and meet the old 101 at National City. But essentially, the only freeway was the one that we put through the canyon in Balboa Park in 46, today's 163, back then the 395. But again, it was a canyon. Same with the old freeway of 4 lanes through Mission Valley, and there was dairy farms. So essentially, that's San Diego before the freeways. Now, you know the freeways that were built. This is a 57 planning map of the California Division of Highways. You can see where Interstate 5, the dotted lines, 805, 54. But I put this up because there's two roads that weren't built, thank God. But they had planned for Route 171, which would have run from the interchange of the I-5 at Pershing Drive. If you've ever noticed that, it's a beautiful curving exit from the I-5 to Pershing Road, to Pershing Boulevard. It's like, why this beautiful off-ramp just to another street? Well, it wasn't. It was built to be part of the west end of this freeway, which would have gone and taken off the south part of Balboa Park Golf Course, would have then run up through Burlingame and South Park, through Switzer Canyon, through 30th Street, if you know this beautiful open space canyons, and then cut through again Burlingame, wiping out homes in City Heights, and merging where the 15 and the 805 come together in this spaghetti complex in Wabash Canyon today. This thing actually remained on planning maps until the 1990s, but the city bought up Switzer Canyon as open space by the 80s, and I mean the last chance for this freeway. But community opposition, was strong the whole time. Now, 252 was a 2.2 mile stretch that would have connected the 5 and the 805 at 43rd Street. If you've ever been on 805 and you see that interchange at 43rd, there are these soaring ramps that come down to this little stoplight, which is 43rd Street. Well, again, that was the eastern terminus of this 8-lane freeway that was going to cut through, again, parts of Southcrest and parts of South San Diego. Unfortunately, Caltrans bought up and paved over a lot of the homes in preparation. But Leon Williams, when he became the first black member of the city council and later county supervisor, he organized really strong community opposition to this. Bill, his successor, they finally got it stopped, and a lot of damage had been done, but there was a redevelopment agency that subsequently has redeveloped it, and there's now homes and a shopping center and a park. But those are two freeways that would have really made a mess of some highly populated areas. But I interviewed Jacob Decama, who was the head of the San Diego division of the California Division of Highways. It didn't become Caltrans' name until 1973. I interviewed him when he was retiring in 1986, and he compared the bridges, the twin bridges of the 805 over Pacific Highway, over Interstate 8 in Mission Valley. He said they were as beautiful as the Renaissance cathedrals in Europe. So that's the mindset of Caltrans engineers. And I mean, I think I had a questioning look when he said that. And in all seriousness, I remember he looked at me, he says, no, I'm serious. They're things of beauty. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to ask too many questions.
Yeah, no.
Is there a story about an off-ramp slicing through the old neighborhood in Isle Street? Because my parents bought a home there.
Well, that would have been part of that 171.
Oh, okay. And that's why they moved down over to Burlington.
Yeah, that would have been the 171, because it's slicing through that north, because if you, I don't have the city map up, but where you think we're boundary, Nile and boundary, well, that's where the 171 would have been curving.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, the neighborhood was pamphleted, with things saying a future freeway, may be coming to your neighborhood. See if you like this off-ramp. This is the last oil map, 1979. Beginning in 73, when the first oil shock crisis during the Israeli-Arab War, all the Arab oil-producing countries cut off exports to the United States for 6 months, and gas stations realized, gee, they got to cut expenses, and one way to do it is don't give away free maps anymore. So by 1979, there were no more free maps. They were still being made, paper maps. Goucher and Rand McNally were selling one in their own imprint. This is the last one for Chevron, and the slide is still sideways. But pretty much, the 805 is done. The 15 is under construction. The last part's the 5. The extension of the 8 to Ocean Beach. It's pretty much, a lot of what looks today. And these freeways were great in the 70s. A lot of them ran through canyons, like the 50 through San Clemente Canyon, and the 805. You can see there was no development, no Scripps Ranch, no University Town Center, no, just no development. But 40 years later, these roads are clogged. The 805 after 1:30, the 15 south after 2 o'clock. But, because the road network essentially hasn't changed, except for managed lanes and a few fixes here and there. But boy, back then you could fly. Back then. So, this, why do I have this slide up here? I'll tell you why. But actually, I should show you one more slide. I'll show you the slide and go back. If you want to know the growth of San Diego, these are all the Auto Club maps post World War II. And if I get the right sheet, I'll tell you. So in 1973, the Auto Club adds a street map of Rancho Bernardo to its countywide map. Back then, there was just a countywide map. Same year, they include street maps of Oceanside, Carlsbad, and Escondido. In 1978, they black out the street names because they've actually issued their own map of Oceanside, Carlsbad, Escondido, and Rancho Bernardo. In 1981, they add Del Mar to that map. In 82, they add the first freeway, San Diego area freeway map. In 83, they issue San Diego, including Tijuana and Ensenada, guide to the areas. In 84, they add a street map of North County with the name North San Diego County map, and they fold Oceanside, Escondido, Del Mar into this more comprehensive version. In 87, they take the San Diego area street map and they divide it into two maps, Central San Diego area and Southern San Diego. In 88, they divide the Northern San Diego County map into Northern Coastal and a Northern Inland. In 1991, they divide the San Diego City map into four: street map of San Diego including Tijuana, street map of East San Diego, street map of North San Diego, and a street map of Oceanside, Escondido area and Fallbrook. And in 2005, they consolidate San Diego County and Imperial County, and they make a new San Diego region map, including San Diego. In 2020, the Auto Club eliminates its map department, so they no longer make their own maps. The maps that you get are either maps that are still current enough that they give, that were done 2020 or prior, or when there are new maps now, they've contracted with a map company out of Vancouver, Canada, that still makes paper maps. So this map here, called Sitting in Your Pocket, San Diego North, Oceanside, Carlsbad, that map is made by our GM Johnson Maps. And all the maps eventually the Auto Club gives out will be by them. And what's interesting is this map that GM Johnson gives out, it lops off, probably inadvertently, but it lops off a section of East Scripps Ranch, east of Pomerano Road, and north of Miramar Marine Corps Air Station that was included on the previous Auto Club maps. So that's progress. You know, that one, by the way, is 2022, that GM Johnson. And they've just issued, for their LA area maps, they've now gone to GM Johnson maps as well. I mean, they're nicely made, the GM Johnson maps, but they're, they're not the same. So here we are to our penguin. Whoops, nope. Here we go. He's got his map, right? He may have a Thomas Brothers atlas that he's holding, I'm not sure. So, for a better part of a century, paper road maps were a defining characteristic, charting the nation's growth and mobility, powered by the automobile. And their stated purpose was objective presentation of landscape, even though we've seen how ghost subdivisions, representations of dirt roads as passable, and other factors limited accuracy, right? But road maps still occupy a major place in our everyday lives, but now they're predominantly through digital representations, which cartographers lump under the term GeoWeb. And whether they're paper, or even the strip maps that are on your car, on your car screen, they have inherent limitations. They're made to facilitate movement, getting you from point A to point B. And particularly paper maps, their limitations, not that they're deliberate, although the World War II maps were deliberately deceptive. Their purpose is limited to helping you achieve greater mobility, which has been a defining point of this country ever since its colonial days, given its size. But they don't tell us which streets need paving, which streets are predominantly commercial, which are safest for walking or for cycling, which areas of the city are rich or poor. They don't tell you whether a neighborhood is beautiful or poor, vibrant or rundown, well-kept or decaying. A paper San Diego road map tells us nothing about the north of 8, south of 8 divide that many politicians and sociologists like to highlight in explaining the disparities in social services in the city. A freeway map doesn't tell you where the choke points are, which interchanges are tricky, such as the old 94 where you get off and on out of the left lane, fast lane, which is a design that they abandoned, realizing it was insane to have people merging into the fast lane on a freeway. When I was growing up in the late 60s, what we commonly call Lower Broadway, which is essentially anything west of Front Street to the Broadway Pier and what today is Gaslamp, were completely out of bounds for us. Our parents would have killed us if we'd gone down there because they were areas of honky-tonks, dive bars, tattoo parlors, and other businesses catering to sailors and Marines. You'd never know that from the maps. And I remember as a kid looking at the county maps that shows the swaths of green on the maps, Cleveland National Forest, thinking to myself, geez, a lot of this doesn't look like forest at all. So, and someone from out of town can easily take a major road on a paper map, thinking that's the fastest way from A or B, where those of us who live in the city know that it's actually slower than using shortcuts through neighborhood streets because it's a traffic light after traffic light, like Mira Mesa Boulevard, right? If you know anything about Miramar, you go on Gold Coast, as bad as it is with its paving. So online maps, theoretically have the same limitations because of design, but the ability to annotate them digitally in real time allows them to depict, much more than just how to get from point A to point B. Crowdsourcing, story maps, other techniques that there are apps that you can even do yourself. I mean, you think of how Google Street View changes your perception of a map compared to a paper map. And even Google's default map, which is the closest to a traditional paper map, can at least tell you every business that's along a commercial street. So unfortunately for Mr. Penguin here, in 100 years, what he's going to look like, God knows. Will he have a chip? Will he be holding an iPad or whatever? So stay tuned. And the last map, I want to know if any of you, the four of you who don't know what this is up.
It's a painting.
What?
Painting.
It is. It's actually a Jackson Pollock painting. But to my mind, I mean, I knew it was a painting, but when I saw it at MoMA in New York, to me, it's, because I lived in Tokyo for 3 years, it's a perfect aerial of Tokyo, with the Sumida River, with the Emperor's Palace, the moat, with some of the tons of commuter railroad networks. So what is a map? It can be artistic, it can be dull, and then now with digital, it can be anything you want. So, thank you for paying attention, and all of these maps are upstairs, and you go to special collections, they'll pull it right out. If you want to see your neighborhood or whatever, you look at it for hours. Okay, I unfortunately have to run. I have to drive to LA, so I can't stay. I'd love to chat more, but I've got to get going. But feel free to, Matt can take you through if you want to see a particular slide again up, and there's still some cookies here. They usually disappear by the end of the. All right, but thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
One of these.
Okay, I'll be in.